Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Madhusudan, but before moving further, before I start this new series of economy, please confirm if audio and video everything is clear. Those of you who are online, please confirm if you are getting the audio and video, if you are able to read what is written as text. Manoj, very good afternoon. Everything is clear. Thank you very much for the confirmation. So, let me introduce for those who are joining it for the first time. This is N100 series of classes. In this series, we discuss, like, we have already completed polity and we have completed the polity from mains perspective. Similarly, in economy also, we are going to cover the complete economy from mains perspective. Here, when I say mains perspective, you need to keep one thing in mind. That is, you will have to come prepared with the prelims concept on your own. To take maximum advantage of these classes, you will have to work on your own also. The basic concepts like what is GDP, how is GDP calculated, like basic concepts of what is foreign exchange, I may not be able to go in much detail. Okay, I would start on this presumption that you know the basic details. After that, I shall be going into further detail, like what in today's class I shall be talking about household consumption expenditure. What is the impact of increased saving or increased household debt? How is this going to impact us? Why is economic, what are the factors that impacts the economic growth? The basics of how to calculate economic growth, I will presume that you understand. However, in case at any point of time you feel that probably it would be better off if basics are told, you may ask it through doubt very quickly in a concise manner. I shall be covering those basics as well. Okay, so before moving further, like, economics is slightly different from polity. We have already covered the polity section. In economy, there is a lot of analysis involved. In polity also there is analysis, but probably in political analysis we remain at mostly the same level at which we start. But in economic analysis, a lot many things are interrelated, and it would require your a lot of attention. Here, even if you miss the class by say 5 minutes or 10 minutes, if you go away from the class, there are chances that the next concept you may not be able to understand. Okay, so it's very important that you come to class regularly on time. It's very important that whenever there is any topic, any term that I utter and you are not able to understand, you ask the doubt. So that's why it is important that you attend these classes using your desktop or laptop, where you can type frequently and you ask your doubts. More importantly, the note making is very critical for economy. As I have told you earlier, those who have studied from me earlier and those who are joining for the first time, see, when you are making notes, first and foremost thing is that you must make notes. If you are thinking that probably I will listen to it and I will be able to understand and memorize all the things, you are cheating with yourself, not with me. So note making is very, very important. And how you should make notes? 1/3 of your page, of any page, 1/3 must be left vacant. If you are like over conscious with the cost, you can keep it to 1/4, but not less than that. Okay, you should write in the rest of 2/3 only whatever I dictate in class. Okay, and after the completion of any topic, after the completion, say you write all these things and then a topic is completed, you must have a data page. In this data page, you should write down all the data that you studied in this topic or chapter. Like, we will start with economic growth and development. So with respect to economic growth, whatever data I shall provide to you, you must compile all those data in one place. Okay, so like what will happen in future when you will do the answer writing, etc., you will come across the probably I did not use that data, I had that data. But if you keep on finding that data in every page of your notes, it will be very difficult, and sometimes it so happens that you will spend a lot of time, you meander around the same data, although the data is written on the page, you do not get it. So that's why it is important that data are compiled at one particular page at the end of every topic. Okay, why I have told you to keep 1/3 of the page vacant is because economy is something which is updated very frequently. Like the data, GDP data that I will give you will change by the time you will write the exam. Okay, probably today I will tell you that India is probably at a relatively sweet spot, expecting a, if not double-digit growth, but a good amount of growth. But by the end of the financial year, probably we can have either double-digit growth, or we may even go to the scope of recession. So if things change, first you will have to update the data. Second, when the new things are coming, their regions analysis will also come. So you will have to frequently update your notes also. Maybe some part of the note you have to strike down because they may not remain relevant after a point of time. Okay, so that's why this economic is a continuous exercise, especially mains portion, because in prelims portion the static parts are asked. The static parts are more or less fixed. You know, whatever you have studied is going to be useful for quite some time. But this mains is very dynamic, and it will not remain the same after 1 year when you will be appearing in the exam. Okay. Next, there is also like the various aspect of economy are interrelated. Okay, one element has effect on another element. For example, saving has effect on investment, investment has impact on economic growth rate. Then there could be sometimes cyclical relationship, there could be sometimes linear relationship. So sometimes while writing answers, it could be useful that you write in these correlations. You may write your answer depicting a flow chart kind of a scheme, that A is leading to B, B is leading to C, C is leading to D, and maybe D is leading back to A, if there is a cyclical relationship. So while writing answers also, you can write answer in this way rather than writing in the language format where you will write that A is impacting B, second point you will write that B is impacting C, or third point, or independently. Many a times I see students independently writing that what are the implications. Implication is that B will happen, C will happen, D will happen, and then they can write A will happen. Rather than writing in such a fashion, if you choose to write, make a flow chart, it would improve your presentation as well. Okay, and there are chances of you getting higher marks. Okay, let me see if I is anything is left. Okay, and then there is one more thing that I would say, that I would give you certain ways in which you can generate more points in these classes. Like one approach that will be helpful to you throughout the economy is supply chain approach. There are two sides of a supply chain. One is where production happens, and another is where consumption happens. So from production to consumption, if you keep all these things in mind, that what are the steps involved, and if we have to think of implication, we have to think on all these actors. If we have to think for the regions, then also we can think for all these actors. If uh, we have to give suggestions, then also we have to give suggestions for all these actors. If we have this approach, it is going to be very helpful for us in making more number of points and having a diverse multidimensional answer. And how you can think, see, from production side, there are three factors of production. Most of you must be understanding it. Land, this is something that is, before I start the first topic, I am just creating the background how you have to think. When I pick up any of the main topics, then you have to think in this direction, and I would expect you to give me answers when I ask questions. Okay, first is land, then second is labor, third is capital, and fourth factor of production, entrepreneurship. Okay, now you have to think from all this perspective how you can improve production. If for any sector I am talking, if the question could be on service sector, industry sector, agriculture, you have to think from all these four factors of production. And obviously, after the production, what will happen? The things will go to the market. For that, you will be requiring infrastructure, and then there has to be a market where you have to talk of demand. But production is not sufficient. Ultimately, these things should be sold in the market as well. So then you have to think from the market perspective. Market is effectively the demand side of anything. So this is the supply side and this is the demand side. After that, one more thing that you have to keep in mind is that government is something which is involved everywhere. Government can influence all these factors. So you must always think from the government perspective, that where can government fit in, what can be changed by the government, or what is being done by the government, or what is not being done by the government. So next, you must think from the government perspective. And then there are certain external factors as well. So there are actors within India, within our domestic territory, and there are actors outside our domestic territory. For example, some policy changes done by Fed, some policy changes done by WTO, or like because of the increasing or decreasing demand in other economies like USA, something happening in, say, war between Ukraine and Russia, and all those things also have impact on Indian economy. Okay, so this is the structure that you have to keep in mind while giving answers to any question. Now I shall move towards the first topic of the day, that is GDP estimation. So you must be knowing that there are three ways in which GDP is estimated. One is production method, another is income method, third is expenditure method. This is something that all of you must have understood. Okay, production method is also called as value-added method, because here the value addition being done at each step of production is added, and effectively the definition of GDP that we study is like the sum total of all the goods and services produced in the economy is coming from this production method. But whatever is the sum total of goods and services produced in an economy is ultimately going to be the factor income. So the same is, if we are calculating or adding the income of all the actors involved, we are going to reach the same figure, and ultimately someone's income is someone else's expenditure. So if we go by the expenditure method, this should also give us the same number, that is the India GDP. So usually GDP is calculated through all these three methods. Okay, but then recently, what happens that practically there is all this ideally this method, and these method, they should give rise to the same number. But practically, it may not happen. Practically, it may happen that probably you are giving a certain different number from this method and certain different number is this method. This is called discrepancy. So discrepancy is nothing but like when we are using different method to calculate GDP of our country, we get slightly different numbers. The difference is called discrepancy. Okay, this is normal. This will practically always happen. If a question is asked that what are the reasons for discrepancy, you will say that see, the sources of data are different. And see, the reliability of data is another problem. Not all sources are equally reliable. We take a lot of estimation. So because of the estimations, there could be there are error in data. And obviously, we have calculated certain sample, like we have taken a base year, which is 2011-12. Now the GDP reality could be different. GDP composition could vary. Okay, so lack of regular updation is another reason. Lack of updation of base year and other things. So these are the various reasons because of which there could be discrepancy. But last year it was in news because the discrepancy has increased. The discrepancy in the data has increased because of which it was in news. Now, why discrepancy has increased is not something that we can go into, because see, obviously the reasons are here only. Because of these reasons only, the discrepancy has increased. The problem why people were criticizing, because when see, suppose this method is giving you x, this method is giving you say x minus 1%, this method is giving you x plus 1%. Which of these method are you going to say, which of these three you are going to say as the real GDP of India? You tell me, what should be the right way? Like one method is saying that x is the GDP, another method is saying that probably 1% lesser, there is a number less than 1% from x, then the other number which is saying 1% more than x. Which of these three numbers should be taken as the GDP of our country? Please tell me whatever comes to your mind. Yeah, Manoj is saying that probably X should be the GDP. Probably what he is thinking is that we should take the average of all three. Okay, if we take the average, we would get the probably the most correct. This is something which is done in USA. USA says that we will calculate GDP from different methods and we will take the average of them, and that would be our reported GDP. India has been following the practice of declaring GDP by production method. That India, I mean, based on the logic is simple, that as compared to other methods, the data available for production method in India's scenario is more reliable. So that's why India has been traditionally reporting GDP by production method. Another reason is that traditionally the GDP by production method has been slightly more than GDP by expenditure method. India calculates GDP by these two methods. Okay, so traditionally by production method we get the higher GDP. This year what happened, that the GDP by expenditure method was more. So the government said that this is the GDP. So out of the two numbers, whichever is higher, now government adopted this practice that we would be declaring our GDP as the number which is higher of the two. But this is something which is criticized. This is something which is debatable. Okay. So there was another tool introduced, that was a statistical discrepancy. I am just summarizing you as something very complicated. I am just simplifying you for the sake of understanding. Okay, so a tool called a statistical discrepancy has been introduced by Ministry of Statistic and Program Implementation. This ministry has introduced this tool and said that in case to address this issue, whether which of the two GDP is correct, we would be using this statistical discrepancy to report the correct GDP data. Okay. Is any, see, as such there is no international guideline, there are international practices. As I told you that this is a practice being followed in USA, so similarly different countries follow different practices, because of the way their data is available. The country which has more reliable data for say income method, they will probably report GDP on income method. The one which has more reliable, the basis is not which has the higher data. Okay, the basis is that which of your data is more reliable, whether the data related to production is more reliable or expenditure or income. Based on this, every country has developed, and see the error is not much. Okay, this time, however, the discrepancy error was approximately 6.8%. So this time the error has increased. The government did something which is which was not a traditional practice. That it declared that GDP by expenditure method is the real GDP. That's why it was in news. Discrepancy is not something new, it has always been there. What was different this time is, first, the error was more, the difference was more. The second difference was that usually production method gives the higher GDP, this time expenditure method gives the higher number. And the third thing, that government declared that expenditure, the data that we have got by expenditure method is the actual data, is the real data. Now this is something which was criticized by the people. Still, what government is firm on its stand. Probably what we should say is that government should have a consistent policy. There's nothing wrong in having expenditure method as declaring it as actual data. But we should have a consistent policy, but that from now onwards we shall be using expenditure method, or from now onwards we shall be using the production method. The consistency is what you will advise in your conclusion. See, all the method, economically, all these three methods are proven method. None of these method is incorrect. We have studied it, right? That these are the three methods, they should give the same number. So we would not say that either of these is correct. So we can give advice that we should have a consistent policy, either the policy the way USA has, because USA has confidence in all this its data. Okay, it doesn't say that this is right or this is wrong. It says that all the data is equally good. So it simply takes the average. Whereas we have been relying more on this, so we should have a consistent policy. This is what you will advise. Is there any doubt? I would advise you not to do much of research on this topic. Reason being that this is a bit complicated, we may not require that much. Okay. Next is that in general, when we calculate GDP estimate for our country, there are certain issues. So if a question comes on in general, what are the issues of GDP estimation in our country? First is that there is lack of accurate data. The data that we get uh, is often very much inaccurate, and this is true for everything. like not with respect to GDP, like very often we see that the data like uh, IIP data says that economy is going down, whereas GDP growth rate we see that it is going up. There is an index of core industries, index of core industries that, and like these indexes, IIP, GDP, index of core industries, they often give contradictory figures, contradictory data. This simply denotes that probably either of these data are not correct. The data that we are calculating, the source of data, source is not giving the correct numbers. And often like the figures that we get from the employment, the figures that we get from inflation, like when inflation is high, there should be high growth rate, but sometimes we see that inflation is uh, low, still growth rate is high. So these contradiction is very often visible in our economy. And like when we have high inflation and low economic growth, this should go to a problem of stagflation, but our economy does not show the other symptom of stagflation. So probably there is issue with the data. In your answer, you have to simply say that different data often give contradictory picture of our economy. This raises issue about accuracy of data. Okay. And then the another issue is that India has a large unorganized sector. In terms of employment, around 90% of the employment. In terms of contribution to GDP, also around 50 to 60% of the GDP is contributed by unorganized sector. And this, the data for unorganized sector is derived, write it down. The data for unorganized sector is not derived directly, rather organized sector, write it down, organized sector is taken as proxy for unorganized sector. Now this is very much, I mean, even from the perspective of common sense, this would see a bit bizarre. That if you have to calculate, like unorganized sector is very much different from organized sector. But for calculating the data, like how much has been the production in the unorganized sector, you are simply saying that what is the production of organized sector. For organized sector, you can get data very easily. How much has different companies, organized big companies have produced. And then you are simply extrapolating probably in this textile sector, the unorganized contribution is say 20% more than the organized contribution. So you are simply extrapolating for the unorganized sector. And this is definitely inculcating a lot of error. Okay. And this also leads to delay and frequent revision of data. So this is also involved towards accuracy of data. Because see, we when we are not using organized sector as proxy for unorganized sector, and later on we are revising the data, like we also collect some data, some sample survey etc is done of unorganized sector. So initially, like when a quarter is completed within a month, CSO, which is now known as NSO releases the data of GDP figures. That data is based on this, purely based on organized sector estimate. Later on, based on certain data that comes from organized sector, it is revised. So there is also frequent revision of GDP data. And it is a fact that the complete finalization of data with respect to GDP, I mean this, there is a cycle of, there is a 3-year cycle. So in 2024, you will come across that the final GDP figures for financial year 2020 and 21 is now available. This is how the system works. There is frequent updation, although most of the time major changes does not happen, but sometimes it does happen. Okay, so because of this 3-year cycle, also our data is often contested. And then there are certain productive activity which are excluded from our GDP. This is like also known as care economy. But care economy is more than, it's not that all the economic activity which are not included, but a large part of care economy is unpaid, and that unpaid part is not included in GDP estimation. All the household work done by women, for which they are not paid anything. Anything which is happening without any exchange of money is not included in GDP. So all of those people who are teaching on online free of cost, as such, we are not contributing anything to the GDP because there is no exchange of money. Okay, when there is an exchange of money, in that case only there is a contribution to the GDP. Then the surveys, etc. Like we have seen that we are still using the base year of 2011-12, more than a decade old. What the things that we were using in 2011-12, we may not be using now. The things that we are using today, we may not have been using earlier. For example, in 2011-12, feature phone were the rage, not the smartphones. The smartphones had just arrived, whereas today feature phone is marginalized. A smartphone is the rage. We have tablets, etc., which were not available at that point of time. So a lot many things changes in a decade time. This requires the frequent updation of the base year. That is not being done. Okay. Another statistic example you can write. There is a comprehensive survey on unincorporated non-agricultural businesses. So a lot many shops, etc., which are there in our neighborhood, small shops, they are unincorporated, like they are not registered under the Company Act, so they do not file their regular return, that how much has been their revenue, etc. Okay, so these businesses, effectively these are the unorganized sector businesses. So there is a comprehensive survey conducted every now and then by NSO again, and based on this survey we do this estimation of production by unorganized sector. Okay, this survey has not been done since 2016. In 2016 the survey was last done. After that we have not done this survey. So like the survey for base year is also due, base year updation is also due, other surveys are also due. This is reflecting to the reality that probably the data, I mean those who are questioning our data may also have a point. Okay, next aspect that we have to study is that GDP is not a good marker of development. So without reading, I mean, this is something that you must be knowing. Okay, so you tell me, when someone says that GDP is not the good marker of economic growth, what are the points that one can write? Why do we say that GDP is not a good marker of growth? Everyone should reply at least one point. What's wrong with considering that if GDP has grown, probably our government has done the good work? This is a political issue as well. Nowadays, the people are very much aware. So now the politicians are also using this as a tool. The government very often depict a picture of its governance by saying that, see, we have achieved this much of growth rate. It means we have been doing good. Our policies are uh, creating good result. Anyone, please reply why we say that GDP is not all that you should read. It's very simple. I don't know why you are uh, being afraid of replying. See, the first thing first, India is the fifth largest economy as of now of the world. Is India the fifth most prosperous country? The answer is definitely no. So it doesn't matter how much is the cumulative production of our country. Probably what matters is whether a person is having enough income or not. So probably per capita income is relatively better indicator than cumulative income. Average per person, how much is a person earning? Okay. Second aspect is that obviously average does not reflect everyone's income. Okay, probably I mean, from in mathematics we do a study that average may not be the income of anybody in the data set. There are people like Ambani who have 8,000 crore worth rupees house, whereas there are other people who are homeless as well. So the inequalities are not captured in GDP. And then how have you done this production is also important. Whether you have produced using coal or renewable energy, how much damage you have done to the environment, that is also important. This is also not captured in this. And like what kind of activities you are doing. Suppose this could be very interesting. Like there are a lot of dengue cases are there, a lot of medical, like COVID has spread, a lot of innovation happened, vaccine production happened. Health sector will say that probably it has got a lot of boost, a lot of people were spending in the health sector, the share of health sector has grown in overall economy. But as this is not a good sign when you are having a pandemic like COVID. There are various other, like if an accident takes place, people will do a lot of expenditure. The income of a lot many people related to that would increase. Maybe there would be a need of repair work. There would be need of production of new rail coaches if a rail accident happens. But again, this is also not good for the economy. Okay, so these are various issues which are there, because of which we say that GDP is not a good marker of development. First is it's not a measure of overall standard of living. This is first thing. Before that also I told, it reflects the cumulative production, not the income. Or cumulative production is the same as cumulative income of all the people, not the individual's income. You can also write the example that India is the fifth largest economy, but definitely as per capita income, our status is not the fifth largest. Then many key goods, including peacefulness, environmental production, are not measured. Okay, here you can also add to that fact that a lot of unpaid work is not measured. So something which is not included, that is also existing in the economy. Care economy, a large part of care economy is not included in GDP. And then something, again, social and environmental aspects, how you are creating this production of goods and services. That is also important, which is not included. And there are certain social harms, like whether you are producing intoxicants or you are engaged in a sports and health related activities, it doesn't matter to GDP. So the composition, whether the composition includes the social well-being or it includes the social harm, is immaterial for GDP. That's why we say that probably GDP is not a good marker of development. Then what is the good marker of development? There have been various other things like uh, we have Human Development Index, we have gross national happiness, there is green GDP. So these are the various statistics that have been developed to reflect the health, education, social aspect, environmental aspect of the economy. Okay, so probably the government, it would be more suited if the improvement of the government is measured whether our human development index has improved or not, whether gross national happiness has improved or not, whether the green GDP has improved or not. Okay, so it would be, I mean, if a question comes on this line, you should advise that probably it would be better suited if government starts reporting. I mean, government, although government reports regular basis on these indicators as well. Like we do conduct National Family Health Survey that gives report about the outcome of health education as well. Okay. Last aspect, it is not related to GDP. This is the suggestion with respect to GDP data estimation. So obviously, all those problems that we have discussed, you have to simply think of the solution. Like the most obvious thing that needs to be done is that we should update our base year. 2011-12 is too old. It's more than a decade old. Now we need to have, the reason is also because of the COVID, that it could not have been updated. But probably I mean, it's not that the 2021 is also too late to be updated. It should be usual. It is usually updated every 5 years. 5 years is a good enough time nowadays for some structural changes in the economy. Okay. There is another suggestion with the way we deflate the data. Okay. So we calculate real GDP and nominal GDP. You must know the difference between the two. Real GDP is GDP at constant prices. So GDP at constant prices means we are accounting, or we are adjusting for inflation. So suppose the prices does not change, how much have we grown? This is reflected by real GDP. Then there is nominal GDP, is simply that you are not taking into account what was the prices earlier. You are going into the market, looking at the prices of all the goods and services produced. You are doing the summation. You will get the nominal GDP. This is also called a GDP at market price. Now, to achieve from nominal GDP to real GDP, we use deflator. Deflator is simply nominal GDP is inflated by the factor of inflation. So we divide it by a value which is called deflator, and like we get the real GDP. If you have to physically understand, it was inflated, we have deflated it. Okay. Now, current practice that we use in India is we use one deflator. Okay, but the international practice that is being suggested is that use the double deflation. You have a different deflator for output and input. For any sector or industry, like when we are calculating the gross value added by the sector, the value addition comes in output. So we should use a different deflator for output and different deflator for input, because there are chances that the demand supply dynamics are varying for the output and input. For example, let's simply take the example of a tomato ketchup industry. The tomato ketchup industry's output is a manufactured good. Its prices may not change much. Usually, all the manufacturing goods prices relatively remains more stable. Whereas its input is an agricultural commodity, and that to a perishable commodity which has a lot of price variability. So it would be more suited if we use different deflator for output and input of an industry. Okay. Then we can use big data and artificial intelligence for data collection and processing. Obviously, to some extent, it has already been started, but obviously, the more and more of AI and big data that we use, the accuracy of our data will improve. And then we should include all the productive activity. We should take reforms that will institutionalize, that will make more of a formal economy. Because the problem is the data collection from informal sector of economy. So if we have such government policies which will bring about informal sector to the formal sector, like easy taxation collection, labor law reforms, this will go taxation reforms, like GST has become very complicated. Even income tax, corporate tax, they are very complicated. If we simplify it, probably a lot many companies would prefer to formalize themselves. Okay, and then we should engage with uh, international organizations for adoption of international best practices. Okay, if you have any doubt, please ask. I would repeat, this is suggestion with respect to the issues in GDP estimation. Okay, and all of you who are currently online, please like the video, share it with your friends so that those who are missing the class may come online and attend the class. Should I move ahead? The next thing is that what are the factors? Very related question that can be there, although it cannot be completely answered today at the beginning of the session. To completely answer this question, we would probably need to cover the all different sectors of economy, but still, to some extent, we will try to answer it today. Okay, and the question is that what causes economic growth? What are the different factors that are responsible? Like certain countries become developed, certain countries remain developing forever. Why it happens? Just give me a minute. Yeah, please reply. Why it happens? Whatever comes to your mind, you may reply. If the question is that what are the factors that affect economic growth, without reading the things written on the screen. Please reply factors that affect the economic growth. Anyone? Anything that comes to your mind? Something you must have seen on the board? That factor only, if you could write. See, there are two benefits of you replying and you contributing in the class. One thing that I will enjoy teaching. The second factor is that you will enjoy studying as well. When you, and a lot many times you think that probably what I'm thinking is right, but the use of writing it or replying. The point here is that sometimes it may happen, like maybe 20% of the time it may happen that what you were thinking may be slightly wrong, slightly deviated. Okay, so that deviation would be corrected if you reply. I would verify what you were thinking is right. Okay, so Manoj has contributed something like, yes, infrastructure is one factor that contributes. Yes, you are right. Technology, very good point. Because without technology, the development, I mean, in fact, anthropology, we study that technology is the marker of development. How developed you are is that how much, and technology also, like in anthropology, they say, I mean, I'm not talking of economic as of now. In anthropology, there is a theorist, thinker, he says that uh, the technology to harness the energy, this is the indicator of development. How much energy you are able to harness from the nature, what are the technologies that you have, this will indicate the development. Inadequate skills, yes, yes. Per capita income, now Manoj, per capita income is, again, this is the development. The question is that what are the factors that develop the impact. Probably the question is that what are the factors that will improve the per capita income. Inadequate skills, foreign investment, or rather I can say that investment in totality. Now there could be a part of investment coming from domestic sources, a part of investment could be coming from foreign sources. So both foreign investment and domestic investment are the factor that will determine growth, and that's why we look for FDI, right? Yes, next is natural resources. If we have natural resources, if we have coal, we will develop. So all of your answers are right. Again, to write more points, you have to think strategically. The four factors of production, if they improve, definitely the economy is going to improve. Land means all the natural resources. So if we have more of the natural resources, if we have say coal, if those countries which are having large reservoir of say petroleums, those are the developed countries. Okay, so one factor is definitely natural resources. Next factor could be capital formation. It has to be capital, then only you can buy the machinery, etc. And there has to be technological progress. The technology has to be employed to harness those natural resources, to convert them into useful medium. Okay, and this is the factor, like a lot many countries which have a lot of, like African countries, they have a lot of natural resources, but they do not have the technological progress, so they are not as developed as the European countries. So this is also very important. And this is, again, next thing is labor. Labor will come from population growth, and it is not only important that there are people, they should be skilled as well. So workforce should have skills. I have also written age distribution to indicate the fact, because it is not only important that you have population, that population should be in the working age group as well. This is very often written as something called demographic dividend. When you have working age population more than the dependent population. Dependent population is the population of children and old age people. Okay. Then infrastructure development, and last factor which is there is also about political stability. Like in capital formation, you can write about the foreign investment and domestic capital formation. Population growth also adds to economic growth because it increases demand. When demand increases, to fulfill that demand, there is more production, and when there is more production, we call it economic growth. Okay, so these are the factors which often lead. So you can also come across 5 or 6 more factors. Okay, good governance and stable government. Very good, Manoj. So financial constraint inflation might be financial constraint. So financial constraint would come here in capital investment, etc. It is not constraint or the finances, what probably you want to say, or lack of financial constraint, or access to finance. Access to finance, if there is money, definitely there would be investment and there would be growth. And inflation is something like, when I am talking about demand, there should be some amount of inflation. In the topic of inflation, we would come to it in more detail. But yes, some amount of inflation is required for growth, but too much of inflation is again not good for growth. Okay. So it's like it will happen with lot many things in economy, that you should get it in a balanced amount. If you have it too much, it would harm you. If you do not have it, it will also harm you. Now the next question again related to this that can be asked. This is something that even if I do not teach you, you will be able to answer it. But I am just streamlining the information at one particular place for your convenience. If a question is asked that what are the challenges to India's economic growth? Obviously, you must leave some space, because a lot many challenges to economic growth we shall study in course of these lectures. But still, from whatever knowledge that you have, what are the challenges that you can tell? If we say the question is in this context, that why we are not growing at 10%. China had 10 plus growth rate for 3 decades in continuity. That made China almost, I mean, China is on the verge of classifying as a developed country. So if we have to get out of that middle income trap, probably we would have to touch that 10% marker that we have not been able to touch. So what is the challenge? Like in this financial year, we are expecting to grow at 7.2%. Last year we had it 8.2%. That was more than expected. So why? What are the challenges? Why are we not growing? Again, think from that same structure that I have given to you. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, government, external sector. Yes, you are right. Less capital expenditure. We do not have as much of foreign capital coming to our country, or even domestic capital available, or other. There is one more thing which is an indicator of this aspect, is that how much of uh, credit to GDP ratio. Credit to GDP ratio. Like, what is the formal credit extended by the banks? We are presuming that a lot of this credit will go towards investment in the economy. Okay, and in our case, this credit to GDP ratio is roughly around 60%, 50 to 60%. In this range, it varies. Whereas in developed countries, OECD's average is around 150%. 150% is the credit to GDP ratio. So this also reflects that the investment is less FDI also, you can say. Now FDI has not grown at a pace that we would have loved. Our FDI is much less than the FDI received by China. Okay, then lack of natural resources. We do not have the petroleum reservoirs. Our dependency on import is 88%. 88% of our petroleum needs are imported. Sometimes it was, 86% would be the data that you might have seen. They're projecting it to that by the end of this financial year, we would reach to 88%. Okay. Obviously, there is unemployment or other unskilled labor. We have demographic dividend, but whether this is a dividend or disaster, it will depend how much of it is skilled. A lot of our workforce is not skilled. We have this informally skilled. The data says that only 5% of our workforce is formally skilled. Okay, this is very less number. Then in terms of entrepreneurship, you can say that probably ease of doing business is very poor in our country, because of which there is lack of entrepreneurship. Every one of us, none of us wants to take risk. We want to work as a laborer. We seek employment. We do not seek to give employment to others. All our engineering colleges are producing employee, not entrepreneur. So why? One of the primary reason is that there is lack of ease of doing business. The government regulations are one of the primary factors why there is lack of ease of doing business. And there is external factor is our reduced export competitiveness. Competitiveness with most of the our trading partners, we have trade deficit. Overall, also India imports more, exports less. So if we export more, we will produce more. Our economy will grow. This is how China has grown. Yes, Manoj, you can also write about corruption. The government regulation corruption is a premium that you have to pay for doing business in our country. Now, suppose, see, I am investing 100 rupees. It's a simple example. My input cost is rupees 100. Probably I would say that I want to take a 10% profit. I would sell in rupees 110. Someone who is importing from China at a price of say rupees 111, I am more competitive than that person, whether in India or in any other country. But suppose I have to pay rupees 10 bribe. Now my cost has gone up to rupees 110. I have to add profit to it. So I cannot sell it at 110 now. Now I will be selling at rupees 120. Now, if I am selling at 120, the same person who was able to import from China at rupees 111 is now more competitive than me. Or in other countries, suppose the person importing in India from China, that person will, again, there are chances that he will have to pay the corruption money in India. But in other countries, the goods being imported from China would be more competitive because of this corruption. So corruption is playing a big role in making Indian goods and services less competitive, and obviously in discouraging Indian entrepreneurs. A lot many Indian companies are shifting their bases to other countries like Singapore, UAE, Dubai, etc. Why? Because the government regulations are so much, and regulations are there because they boost corruption. Okay. In polity, we have studied it that uh, when we were studying the delegated legislation, we have seen it that the bureaucracy loves to over-regulate. Okay, and this over-regulation is not good for economy. Economic businesses, they do not want over-regulation. Okay, so these are the challenges that we have to write. Then you have to give suggestions. What all suggestions will you give? How you can make India's economy grow faster? Very basic question with respect to economy, and this is a question which is also asked in interviews. Basic, simple question. It looks very simple. You can write a lot many points. Only thing is that you have to structure your answer. Okay, again, you can structure in the same format: land, labor, capital, government, external sector, and obviously entrepreneurship. The same line you can write. First and foremost, you have to, I mean, when we are talking of land, land is able to flexible legislation. What exactly do you mean, Jyoti, by flexible legislations? So first, we should talk of the agriculture productivity. See, agriculture provides raw material for industry and other industries. Okay. So if our agriculture is more productive, and around 45% of our population, 45-46% of our population is dependent on agriculture, it will have two-way benefit. First, it will provide raw material to other industries like textile industry. It will provide raw material. It will also, like food processing industry, it will provide raw material. Second, agricultural productivity will also increase rural income. What will happen if, like, since 46% of our population is dependent, they will have more income if agriculture productivity increases, and their more income will create more demand. More demand will increase production, and this will leads to economic growth. You cannot have more of reservoir, etc. You cannot have more petroleum resources. This is what we have. But the one thing which is in our control is that how much of production you can have from the same land. That is in our, like, a lot many points you can write about agriculture productivity, how to boost agriculture productivity. We shall see in the agriculture chapter. We will discuss that as well. The second is labor. Labor, provide them a skill. Like new education policy, it says that a skill education should be given in secondary level only. So from secondary schooling itself, we shall be providing the vocational training to implement this new education policy. Then there is also issue of underemployment. if we provide employment, we should do things that will generate employment. And whenever it comes to employment generation, you always think of boosting the manufacturing sector. Manufacturing sector is a sector that has the scope of creating a lot of employment. So boost the manufacturing sector. Third aspect, land labor. Then we would go towards capital. How will there be more investment if there is more household saving? If there is more household saving, there would be more investment. We should have FDI related liberalization. More FDI will come. Again, more investment will be there. More capital would be there. We should do technological research. We should improve. The next aspect would be infrastructure. Then ease of doing business reforms plus governance reform, labor reforms, etc. Land reform, labor reforms, those are needed. External sector, diversify the export basket, more of an FTA, etc. Free trade agreement we can do with more countries. Here it's not only a skill, like even human development, like human capital formation, like health and education. These are the factors. If we improve, this will also lead to boost in economic development. So these are the suggestions you can write. Obviously, I mean, these are not only 6 points, there are more points than the one written. Within each point you can elaborate, so depending upon the time and a space available, you can write as many points as required. But if you think in a structured fashion, you will always be able to generate more points than an average student. Are you able to think constructively? Are you able to think through these points, etc.? Please answer. If you are able to think in a structured fashion, obviously by the time our series ends, I will make you think through these lines so many times that this will be inculcated in your habit. Okay, thank you Jyoti and Manoj for confirming it. Next topic that we have is gross fixed capital formation. Okay, so we have been talking about this aspect a lot many times, that see there should be capital, land, labor, capital. Land, obviously, we shall cover it in agricultural activity when we will cover agriculture. Labor reforms also we shall be studying separately. Today, we are going to focus on this third aspect, that is capital, that how is what is the status of capital formation in our country as of now, whether we are forming enough amount of capital or not. Okay, so next is the topic is gross fixed capital formation. Okay, now you must be understanding that gross means total, and fixed capital is that form of capital, like in the form of machinery, etc., that is stable, plant machinery, etc. These are called fixed capital. So, as such, if we look at this factor, this gross capital formation, it is included in gross fixed capital formation and also change in stock or raw material, like the inventory which is maintained by any company, etc., that is also counted in terms of capital formation. And then net acquisition of valuables, whatever acquisition that a company does, that is also counted towards its capital. Well, obviously we are not studying accountancy here, so we need not go into these detail, what is the difference between gross capital formation, gross fixed capital formation. Why I am just telling you that, so that you use them cautiously when they are, when the question when whoever is the question setter is using the word fixed capital, then you shall also use fixed capital in your answer. When he is using the word capital formation, then you will use capital formation in your answer. As such, because the question will not be about any particular company. We are not studying microeconomy, we are studying it from the macroeconomic perspective. In macroeconomic perspective, the question would be about what are the reasons, why they are high, why they are low, what can be done to improve. On these analytical questions will be asked, if at all they are going to be asked. In these analytical questions, the reasons are going to be same, whether we study for the gross capital formation or we study for the gross fixed capital formation. The answer is going to be the same. Okay, but you just need to understand that these terms are slightly different. Okay, I hope it is clear that gross capital formation includes fixed capital as well as change in stock of raw materials and semi-finished and finished good. As such, these finished goods and semi-finished good which is called as inventory, they are as such not capital goods. But still, when we are calculating the gross capital formation, we include them. Okay, and normally capital means we only understand this fixed capital, but there is a slight difference between gross capital and fixed capital. Just you need to understand, so that in question, while answering a question, you are carefully using these words, because a lot many articles also I see written by various institutes, they do not take care of these nuances. If you simply take care of these nuances, the economy professor who would be evaluating your copies, he would be very happy and give you 1 extra marks for sure. Next, the question that can be asked is that why are we studying it? Why are this gross cap? I mean, I will not talk of the fixed capital formation. Why is this capital formation or gross fixed capital formation is important for economic? Why are we studying it? Can you answer me? It's simple. You have to simply think from this perspective, why is capital important? The answer is going to be same. Rather, the question when the question is worded like this, why GFCF, gross fixed capital formation, is an important economic variable, probably the question setter is asking, why should we bother? Why should we calculate in the economy? What is the gross fixed capital formation? Why should we not only calculate or bothered about GDP growth rate. Yes, Jyoti, you are right. So, as I have told you earlier, whatever you think, you will always be thinking in the right direction. So, just tell me very quickly. Investment purposes, yes, it will reflect the investment. So, suppose gross fixed capital formation or the capital formation in the economy is growing, it will reflect that probably more investment is happening in the economy. Anything else? Not only more investment, but see, you must have studied that growth rate is equal to investment divided by capital output ratio, COR, or incremental growth rate is equal to incremental investment divided by incremental capital output ratio. So it means that more, see, first thing is that more GFCF fixed capital formation, it reflects more investment. And why is more investment required? A screen is not clearly visible. I can see that probably there is issue in resolution. You can refresh it. There could be issue. You can check what is the resolution that you are getting. You can increase the resolution. It will make the screen visible, because in front of me there is a screen on which everything is visible. You can refresh your screen. That may solve the problem. Yeah. So first thing is that if more capital formation is happening, from now onwards I will only use capital formation word. Okay, so if more capital formation is happening, there is definitely going to be more investment. It is indicative that there is more investment, and more investment will lead to higher growth rate. Okay, now the next thing is that probably we need to do some economic analysis or some qualitative analysis as well. Like, if more investment is happening, investment will happen in technology as well. So probably this will also reflect towards more technological upgradation. And if more technological upgradation is happening, probably there would be self sustainability, Atmanirbharta, self sustainability will come in the economy. The economy will be self sustained. It will also lead to it will also lead to availability of wide range of goods and services. Availability of wide range of goods and services in the economy. So more choices to consumer. The consumer will have more choices. And see, one more thing, when we are investing in technology, like technology is growing, plant and machinery uh, is growing, it means that obviously there is more productivity. in economy. And say, who will do this investment? More often than not, it is the private players. Obviously, government also does investment, but so is the private players. So there are high chances that if more fixed capital formation is happening, it means private players are investing more. So it is also an indicator of businesses confidence in economy. They are confident that probably economy is going to grow. That's why they are investing. So if the gross fixed capital formation is growing, it is indicating that businesses are confident about India's growth story. So if they are confident, they will invest. So this is a virtuous cycle. If they are confident, they will invest more. If they invest more, the growth rate would be more. If growth rate is going to be more, again they will invest more. So once you are in this virtuous cycle, the economy will keep on growing. And once this confidence is gone, if for some reason is gross fixed capital formation reduces, this is an indicator that probably we are headed towards economic recession. That's why this is a very important indicator, because if gross fixed capital formation is low, it will start a vicious cycle. Okay, it will indicate that businesses do not have confidence. They will reduce investment, they will reduce entrepreneurship, it will reduce the growth rate, it will start a vicious cycle of low growth rate and recession. Is it clear? If you have doubt in any of the points, please ask. Next aspect is, what is the recent trend? I mean, this is why we are studying it. What is the recent trend? So, or rather, trend overall, till from independence to, you can say, LPG reforms, it was hovering around 10%. The gross fixed capital formation, this was hovering around 10% since independence to liberalization. Then after LPG reforms, it started growing and it reached its peak in 2007-8. At that point of time, it reached around 27%, which was very high. Okay, but after this, again it started reducing, and obviously during COVID there was impact of COVID also. In 2020-21, it came to the level of 19.7%. Recent time also, again, now it is hovering in this range only. So in recent, if we look at the recent trend, our gross fixed capital formation has come down. And obviously this is not a good sign. Why? Because this is indication of that the businesses do not have confidence in India's economic growth. Probably, I mean, if the capital formation does not happen, again the growth will not happen. So we may not be able to sustain the high growth rate path if economic investment is not high. the capital formation is not high. Okay, so first we need to understand what are the reasons for reduced capital formation. Now, one more thing that you have to understand, if you have to answer this question, how this capital formation takes place. If you simply think in terms of money, there is one more good thing about economy is that you have to think about money, and this is something that comes naturally to us. We always think about money. Okay, so in terms of money, if we simply think, it is like there is money, someone is having money that would be taken by someone else who is interested in doing entrepreneurship. He will invest it. When he will invest it, effectively this is the capital formation, simple terms. Or if we simply think that there is saving by someone, if someone is doing the saving, ultimately this saving will, he will save it to some places, maybe in bank, the bank will give credit to someone, this saving will translate into capital formation. The saving will be equal to investment for simplified terms. Okay, and this is not a oversimplification, this is very practical simplification. Okay, so if you have to simply think from this perspective, why is capital formation reducing? Probably you can think, why is saving reducing? Why is someone less interested in investment? Why is someone less interested in taking loan? All these things will give you the answer that why there is reduction in fixed capital formation. Now, can you give me the answer? Please tell me at least 2-3 points that the trend is reducing. Do not give me the reason of COVID. Give, obviously COVID is one of the reasons. COVID and COVID induced slowdown is the reason. That is, we have already discussed. Conspicuous consumption. Okay. So, I mean, just let me explain what is this conspicuous consumption. Conspicuous consumption is the consumption that you do for show off. You are consuming not because you need it, rather because someone has done it. Like in the marriages, we have a lot of conspicuous consumption. Yes, so to simplify it, obviously Jyoti's answer is correct. We are heading towards more of consumption. Obviously, when we are doing more consumption, we will do less saving. But traditionally, that's not the case. Especially in this period, it was. I mean, even not only 2007-8, it was at its peak, but even until 2012-13, it was not very low. I mean, till 2011-12 also, it was very high. I mean, sufficiently high. And it was being said that probably the Indian societal mindset is such that people consume less, people have a focus on saving, and that is good because this is good in a way that we are not dependent on external sources only. We are self-sufficient. We have internal sources to finance our investment. Okay. Government policy. You are saying that government policy, which policy will have to be a bit specific, Manoj, that which policy is leading towards more or reduction in capital formation. Rather, if you are saying like taxation, yes, that is another reason. The high taxation has been traditionally a reason why people have less saving because there are taxes. I mean, I'm earning 100 rupees, I'm paying 30 rupees tax. With the 70 rupees, I have to meet my expenditure as well. And another obvious thing that none of you is saying, see, simply think from the individual perspective. First, my income is less. I am only earning 100 rupees. Second, out of this 130 rupees, I am giving tax to the government. Now, do not say that, sir, those who are earning 100 rupees do not have to pay taxes. I am simplifying it. Okay, so 30% is the tax rate. Out of this remaining 70, there is very high inflation. Tomato is 100 rupees per kg. So is onion and potato. If not 100, they are definitely around 50, 60, 70 rupees per kg in all the major cities. So because of the high inflation, also the saving of the people have reduced. The next aspect, okay, let me show you this. First is there is increased tendency of consumption. Because of the high consumption, there is less saving. Because of the less saving, people are not investing much. Okay, high rate of unemployment. Then there is high taxation. Then there is slowdown in pace of reforms. So when reform is not happening, again the entrepreneurial spirit is down. People are not willing to invest because they see a lot of what do you say a lot of bottlenecks in production steps. Then there is dual balance sheet problem. Dual balance sheet problem is that uh, there is there has been a case of high NPA in our economy. When there is high NPA, it means there were a lot of businesses who became non-profitable. So businesses failed, businesses failed, and businesses had taken loan. That those loan became NPA, and this NPA made the banks balance it, or rather they affected the banks balance it. The banks became less profitable. Okay, it will also lead to banks were less inclined. Banks became conservative in lending. Practically happened. The bank gave a loan to Vijay Male and he ran away from the country. Obviously, when next time some businessman will go to the same bank, he would be more conservative. He will ask for more number of papers. He will check more of his documents, whether he is uh, telling the truth, whether he is actually profitable. So obviously, it would be difficult for anyone to access the credit, less investment. Then high inflation, we have already discussed, and then high cost of lending. In recent time, the RBI has consistently high repo rate, high policy rate, you can simply say. Because of the high interest rate in our economy, the cost of lending has increased. Cost of lending is simply the interest that you have to pay when you borrow from bank. So because of the high interest rate, ultimately people are not, I mean, the businesses are not interested in borrowing, so they will not borrow, they will not invest. Okay, so these are the factors which have led to high or fall in gross fixed capital formation. And one more thing, see, whatever is the fixed capital formation, this have two part. One is like government capital formation, another is private capital formation. In terms of the government has been investing a lot, especially in infrastructure. Okay, so the reduction that has happened in on the parts of private capital formation. So if the question is about why there has been reduction in private fixed capital formation or private capital formation, the answer is same, because there is no reduction in on the part of the government, or rather what the this gap is, I mean, the government is trying to fill this gap. Government is investing a lot, especially in infrastructure sector. That is a good thing being done by the government. Okay, have you noted it, all the points? Any doubt you may ask? See, these are the things which involves a lot of analysis. So not only during the class, but after the class also, you must immediately after the class, you must revise your notes. And it's not important whether these questions are asked directly or not. It is important for the sake of understanding. When you are able to correlate these factors, when you are able to generate these points on your own, it strengthens your economic understanding. And once your understanding is firm, in the exam you are definitely going to write one or two brilliant points that others would not be able to write, who have simply memorized points from some compilation. Okay, so that's why it is important to attend the classes, and after the class immediately do one round of revision. And if any other point you are able to think during the revision process, you must ask in the next class. At the beginning of the class I will always give you time. So these are the sessions which are in the, although it is on YouTube, they are the live classes only, and treat it as class, take benefit from these just like a live class. Now we have talked about the saving. The next we are going to talk about the household expenditure. So there was this survey conducted about household consumption expenditure. Again, NSO conducts this survey. Earlier it was NSSO. Now it is NSO. So NSSO conducts this household consumption expenditure survey. Okay. Some data is there based on this household consumption expenditure. I am just giving you a data. A direct question on this may not be asked, but definitely this data has some understanding for us. And this data can be used at various places in our lecture. Okay, or not only in economy, even in society, etc. You can use this data. I will tell you which data you can use where. So just write it down. So overall, the trend, the survey says that the trend, and this is a survey which is released after a gap of 10 years. Last time the survey was conducted 10 years ago. So see, this is an important one. Now the first thing it says that monthly consumption expenditure, monthly per capita consumption expenditure, MPCE. I will talk in terms of MPCE only for various factors. Monthly per capita consumption expenditure. This is not capital expenditure. Earlier was capital. This is consumption expenditure. So monthly per capita consumption expenditure is showing a increasing trend. This is good. Okay. So like in all the surveys that have been conducted, the monthly per capita expenditure has increased only since 1990. Okay. So since 1990 only, the per capita expenditure has been consistently growing. Now, but there are certain things. First is there is rural urban divide, which is visible by the data that has been released. Okay. And the survey has said that the monthly per capita expenditure in rural areas, in rural area it is 3773, whereas in urban areas it is 6453 rupees. So an individual person in rural area is on an average having an expenditure of rupees 3773, whereas in urban area it is 6453. Obviously it was expected, but the gap is around 60%, more than 60% is the gap between rural areas and urban areas. Then there is also a divide between rich and poor. This was also obvious. Who will spend more? Rich people as compared to poor people. But the data is that the top 5% to bottom 5%, the ratio of monthly consumption expenditure of top 5% to the bottom 5% is 8, approximately 8 in rural India, and it is approximately 10 in urban India. This is something that you can use to reflect the inequality in consumption. Inequality in income data we very often get. We talk about the inequality in income. Oxfam report is there. This is inequality in consumption. The poor people are not consuming the goods and services. It is only the rich. And even in urban area, inequality is more. Obviously, this is also something common sense. In urban area, the poor is not having the, I mean, is again, the basic sustenance level is the his expenditure, whereas rich are very rich. There is antila. Okay. One more surprising thing that has happened, that MPCE, monthly per capita consumption expenditure of agriculture household, is less than rural household. This has happened for the first time. See, there are people in the rural areas who are engaged in non-agricultural activities. Okay, so it is not that agriculture and rural is the same. 70% of India's population lives in rural areas, but only 45% of India's population is dependent on agriculture. So rest of the rural people are doing something else. Okay, so for the first time, like traditionally, this is something that has happened, that the consumption expenditure of agriculture household has been more than non-agriculture, like the labor class and the other artisans, etc. They, I mean, it is the agricultural people who were relatively well off. But for the first time, the MPC of agriculture household has gone below the rural household. This is again, when you talk of the agricultural income, this data you can use over there. When we will talk about the declining status of agriculture. Now agriculture is not as remunerative as other activities in the rural areas. Okay. And then the MPCE of scheduled tribe is less than scheduled caste, is less than the national average. This was also expected. In polity also we have seen that with respect to education indicator, with respect to health indicator, at all the places the same trend has been followed, and the same trend is visible in consumption expenditure also. Scheduled tribe are consuming less because they have less income, their health indicator also less, everything is less. Okay. Now, one more thing that has happened is that share of expenditure on food is declining. Now people are spending a lot on smartphones also. This is also expected. Like foods are inferior goods. So as people's income increases, their expenditure or the share of their expenditure on inferior goods reduces. This is something that you must have studied in microeconomic, basic concept. So this is visible in the consumption expenditure survey also, that share of expenditure on food is declining, and even among the food, the share on cereals is reducing. Again, this is validating our economic theory. Cereals are again given goods, As people income increases, they tend to consume less of cereals. So the same is happening. So it is also reflecting the very first fact that the MPC has shown the increasing trend. People's income is increasing. So all those things are validated in this data. Now, when you have to talk of when you talk about the SC/ST, then you will use this data. When you talk about the people expenditure on food, etc., if a question is asked, then you will talk of this data. Okay, so that's all that we shall discuss in today's class. In tomorrow's class, we shall move on to the next topic. Make sure that all of your friends are also aware of this series. Complete economy would be covered in these classes. So do not miss any classes. Your economic concepts would be refreshed, would be dealt in great detail. In-depth analysis would be done of all the topics. Okay, and do tell me in comment section how did you like this lecture, whether you liked it or not, whether you want any change, whether you want any things to be covered, any topic, etc. If you have any doubt, do mention it in the comment section. Do let me know whether you liked, how much you liked this lecture. See you again tomorrow at 2 p.m. Have a nice day.